For those of you at home, if you have a chalice or a candle to light for our service, now is a really good time for you to get it ready, okay?
And flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's cloud illusions I recall. I really don't know clouds at all. Moons and Junes and Ferris wheels, the dizzy dancing way you feel as every fairy tale comes real. I've looked at love that way, but now it's just another show, and you leave them laughing when you go. And if you care, don't let them know. Don't give yourself away. I've looked at love from both sides now, from give and take, and still somehow it's love's illusions I recall. I really don't know love at all.
I respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered today on Treaty 6 territory, a land that is rich in history, some small part of it being the history of settlers who've lived and worked here, and most of it being in the hearts and minds of the Indigenous peoples who have inhabited and stewarded this land through countless centuries, countless millennia, really. I was born and have lived my whole life on Treaty 6 land. We're all treaty people, no matter how short or long our relationship with this land has been. As treaty people, we must be responsible for living in right relation and reciprocity with all the peoples of this land and for the continued stewardship of this land. Each of us is a part of the legacy which waits to be inhabited by our descendants. A tradition that dates back centuries, the recognition of traditional lands is now a call to us to acknowledge that we are Treaty 6 people, to remember our responsibility to deepen our understanding of the treaty, and to actively participate in the ongoing process of truth, reconciliation, and healing. Bienvenue, Tawau, welcome to Westwood Unitarian, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm so glad to be with you in this gathering this morning, and I offer a special welcome to those of us who are first-time visitors or consider themselves newcomers or are returning after an extended absence, whether that be a month or years. Westwood is a compassionate community of free religious thought, inviting all people to rest, grow, and serve the world. This morning, as always, our service is a collaborative effort. My name is Jacqueline Willett. My pronoun is she, and I am conducting this service this morning. Tech hosting is being provided by Bill Lee and Hannah Dixon with backup from Brenda Niska-Arrow. I saw David already, so as usual, he's getting things organized so that there'll be coffee and tea to enjoy after we're done. And the worship committee, led by Rebecca Patterson, has organized this and every other service Westwood offers. This service in particular is part of the Meaning Making series. We're one of 15 Canadian Universalist Unitarian congregations who are sharing resources to create an 8-part series on the roots of resilience. Welcome all who join us today as we enter into sacred time. We come together to contemplate one of the aspirations of Canadian Unitarian Universalism, our aspiration to be actively engaged, to work joyfully for a just and compassionate society. Justice and compassion may feel intensely vulnerable in this moment, as the forces of hatred and fear seem to keep rising up all around us and all around the world. May this time together, when we reconnect with each other and to our own personal sense of the sacred, renew and deepen our aspirations. May this service provide clarity and help us to be grounded in a deeper knowing that our lives become more meaningful and our spirits more whole the more we actively engage in this pursuit of justice and compassion. For our participants on Zoom, if you have a chalice or a candle nearby and wish to light it for the service, now is the time. Kindling our flame today, may it reawaken and strengthen our dedication to our UU principles and bless the bonds of our community as we deepen our fellowship together. Please join in singing Make Channels for the Streams of Love. The lyrics are here on the screen, and Carrie will play an entire verse before we join our voices in song.
May
This is a moment in our week when we take the opportunity to express something important that is going on in our lives and the lives of those around us, to celebrate what brings us joy and to share what is weighing on our hearts. Every bit as important, we are here to listen to each other and to bear witness to the poignancy of life. For those of us in the building, you're invited to come forward and speak, and then light your candle as the next person speaks, or you may choose to light a candle in silence. We're also happy to bring the microphone to you if you wish. For those of us who are online, could you please raise your hand so that we can acknowledge you? We're going to begin with candles from those of us who are in the room, and I'm going to take the prerogative of being the first. This is the candle I will light for all of those sorrows and celebrations that we hold close in our hearts. Could you please join me for the affirmation? May the light of these candles inspire us to use our power to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to serve the spirit of truth in loving affection and trusting hope. At this point, I'm going to invite Lorian Kennedy to come forward, as well as Margaret Schubert.
Last fall, we affirmed Jacqueline Willett as our lay chaplain. Lay chaplaincy is an important outreach program of the congregation, and lay chaplains represent their congregation in the wider community. They're expected to perform rites of passage in a manner that celebrates and dignifies these special occasions in human life, adding spiritual depth to the lives of individuals and communities. Westwood will hold a formal installation ceremony once the Canadian Unitarian Council and the province of Alberta provide the necessary registration and license. In the meantime, we wish to recognize Jacqueline as our official lay chaplain. As a symbol of that office, we entrust her with the lay chaplain stoles for the term of office that she serves as our lay chaplain. Westwood has 3 stoles. The first one, this woven stole, has the rainbow colors and the Unitarian Universalist chalice. The second stole has the symbol of the Canadian Unitarian Council, our national organization. And the third stole has the Westwood Tree of Life. That's the stole she's going to use on Saturday. We hope Jacqueline will wear them with pride as a reminder of our support and love. Thank you.
You have my humble thank you. Each person's contributions of time, talent, and treasure help to sustain this community. We're grateful that you are here and for all that you are able to do to support Westwood. And this slide shows how to donate to Westwood. And now our song of gratitude.
Together we share, and from this we live.
To begin our meditation this morning, we have these words from Thich Nhat Hanh. Every morning when I wake up and get dressed, I leave my hut and take a walk. Usually the sky is still dark and I walk gently, aware of nature all around me and the fading stars. One time, after walking, I came back to my hut and wrote this sentence: I am in love with Mother Earth. I was as excited as a young man who has fallen in love. My heart was beating with excitement. And now a few moments for us to just contemplate that. As you come back to this room and this space, this time, I invite you to join in singing Rising Green. Riley Yo is an organizer and facilitator with extensive experience in digital campaigns. Prior to entering seminary, she was the Director of Communications and Public Engagement at the David Suzuki Foundation, and she currently serves as co-founder of Climate Plan, a membership-based organization that helps people and their communities respond to climate change. She received her MDiv from the University of Toronto, completed her chaplaincy training at Victoria General Hospital. Her work focuses on the twin challenges of spiritual resilience, and systems of change in the face of the polycrisis, which she identifies as being the interlocking crisis of crises that defines our time. She lives in James Bay on the unceded territories of the Swenhung, a Lekwungen-speaking people, with her partner Jamie and their children Avery and Elise. And now it's her turn.
Looking at the world around us today, we see so much that breaks our hearts. We live in the time of the polycrisis. That's a term you'll be familiar with if you've heard me speak before. It's that interlocking crisis of crises, everything from drug poisoning to housing unaffordability to democratic decline and the rise of fascism to systemic racism to rampant inequality. I'm just naming a few of the elements. And very close to so many of our Canadian Unitarian Universalist hearts, it also includes, of course, the climate crisis. As governments across the country are turning their back on climate action in the form of the carbon tax, I know many of you are asking yourselves, how can this be? And where do we go next? How do we listen to that aspiration of the Canadian Unitarian Council to be actively engaged, which calls us to strive to work joyfully for a just and compassionate society, when we are facing such strong headwinds against meaningful climate justice? We look ahead to the federal election, and the most popular party is running against the carbon tax. The incumbent party bought a pipeline. As a UU who's not too long out of seminary, one place that I look for answers is to our long tradition. I look to the unique perspectives of Unitarians and Universalists who were willing to be heretics and activists and prophets. I look to the wisdom that they brought to the tough times that they also had to live through. So back during the Protestant Reformation, all the way back in the 16th century, Martin Luther and others who wanted to break from the corrupt hierarchy of the Catholic Church called for something called the priesthood of all believers. The priesthood of all believers meant that all Christians, whether they were clergy or lay people, had a shared responsibility for transmitting the faith. Leaders in the faith had to derive their authority from the delegation of the lay people, who were also, in their own way, priests of the good word of God. This had all sorts of implications for creating more democratic governance of the churches, taking away the imposition of leadership from Rome. Now, one of our most famous Unitarian Universalist theologians, James Luther Adams, took this further in 1947, just a couple years after the Second World War, when he called for the prophethood of all believers, the responsibility of all Unitarians to be prophetic. Now, of course, the idea of being prophetic might be immediately uncomfortable for us now in the 21st century. Prophecy might sound a little strange in our mouths. We might associate it with claiming a supernatural ability to see into the future, or with trying to scare people with metaphysical claims about the end times. But you don't need to be a fortune teller to see into the future these days. We can see how the curve of our greenhouse gas emissions is climbing, and we may not know the precise impacts, but we know enough about the broad contours that we feel the urgency to act. James Luther Adams said, "The prophetic liberal church is the one where people work together to interpret the signs of the times in light of their faith, to make explicit through discussion the epochal thinking that the times demand. All members share the common responsibility to attempt to foresee the consequences of human behavior with the intention of making history rather than being pushed around by it. Only through the prophetism of all believers can we together foresee doom and mend our common ways." But what does it mean to try to make history rather than be pushed around by it? What does that call to act like prophets really require us to do? So first, I think we have to let go of our image of the prophet as strident, focused on apocalypse, the person who goes it alone with a message of doom and disaster. The emerging social science around climate change communications is very clear that this does not work in conversations about climate change. Climate communications experts talk about how we need to thread the needle between unrealistic optimism, the idea that it might all be okay because of technology on the one hand, and climate doomerism, the claim that it's impossible to solve climate change or maybe too late to act. That's a narrative that the fossil fuel industry loves and has spent significant resources trying to spread. We need to thread the needle between too much unrealistic hope on the one hand and demobilizing fear on the other. Climate communications expert John Marshall, who recently completed the largest message testing experiment ever done on the climate debate, says that the way through this is love. To connect people to love of children and place and the future, to all the things they want to save and protect from an inspired place of love and empathy. In all the messages that they tested in countries all across the G20, which are responsible for 80% of global emissions, they found that what would make people want to act most on climate were messages that focused on love. Messages that evoked feelings of love, particularly love of children and future generations, easily outperformed all other messages. As we see more people turning to far-right movements and to conspiracy theories to act out their sense of loss, their anger, their fear, their alienation, those of us who want climate action are being called on to tell a more compelling story about what the future might bring. Fascism rides in on fears about the future. It wraps itself in nostalgia and promises that the future can be like the past, that we can make America and Canada great again. It amps up fears about the future that have a real basis in reality. But what it offers as a way to navigate those fears is selfishness and scapegoating. In order to actively engage, we've got to get better at telling our story about the future, one that acknowledges the risks, but also paints a picture of opportunity and progress. Multiple studies show that even as more people believe in climate change and feel much more deeply impacted by it, they are still not comfortable talking about it. They're not comfortable being prophetic voices. We are understandably uncomfortable with conversations that can become angry or just incredibly depressing. But this is the other form of active engagement that we're called to undertake. To go from being a culture where hard topics are either completely avoided or completely polarizing, where we don't talk about politics at the dinner table because it's too uncomfortable and too divisive, to being a culture that can handle strong emotions and disagreement, where each side can listen to the other and then tap into shared values and experiences that are underneath the politics. We've got to get good at that kind of emotional alchemy, at turning the lead of conflict into the gold of connection. Especially with a pivotal federal election ahead of us this year, we've got to have the kind of loving conversations that can prevent people from being swept up into conspiracy theory and fear. I want to recommend to you an article called Riding the Red Wave by the cultural worker and writer Susan Raffo. So she describes her experience as she walks all across Trump country. She's spending a year traveling by foot from Maine all the way across the middle of the United States to California. And in November, during the US election, she was in Kansas, a state that Trump won easily. She writes beautifully about her conversations with Trump supporters, about how surprising it is to hear things from them, like how important they think it is to learn from and to respect Indigenous land management practices. About how they live in towns where the poverty rate is 40%. And she also writes about how emboldened some people feel to be more hateful, especially towards scapegoats like immigrants and trans people. She writes about the real need to be strategic and brave in confronting violence and keeping our communities safe. She also writes about how, walking across the country, she has fallen in love with people again. Her walk was motivated by a dream she had of hundreds of people stepping out of their homes and just beginning to move, beginning to walk up to a stranger and greet them, ask how they could help and what they could do, to listen and wait. In this work that she has been doing of connecting with people who think differently than she does, she has reached many of the same conclusions that John Marshall and his team have. She writes, "Love is really the best weapon we have. Love and care and respecting the dignity and agency of the person we meet, and believing what they tell us, and not trying to change them as part of a 10-point plan, but instead trusting something else." I think that means trusting that truth, joy, compassion, and love ultimately tell a better story than fear and hate. That the climate crisis has the potential to be a prophecy of a different relationship to the land and to each other, to shifting us out of self-interest, disconnection, and exploitation into generosity, connection, and abundance. Now, it's easy in the face of so much rising hate to still feel like love is a naive response. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Love without power is sentimental and anemic." So how do we have a strategic and muscular prophetic love? How do we use love to build power? I want to point you to the many organizations in Canada that are doing this work. And in the order of service, you'll find more information, like Common Horizons or the Reconnection Project or Neighbors United. As Dr. Courtney Howard says, the best antidote to anxiety is action. To join the joyful and compassionate work of shaping history together, of looking at what we know the future will hold and then speaking about it with love and conviction. Now, those of you who have been in this work a long time likely know that love is also what can sustain us personally. Finding underneath our hope and our fear that deep love of the world that gives us grounding and gives us courage. We don't do any of this alone. The reason we belong to UU community is to do it together. That's what James Luther Adams had in mind, that we support each other to make history together, that we support each other through the crises that are already upon us, and support each other through the uncertainty that lies ahead. We're here to prophecy together as part of an ecosystem, an interdependent web of love and justice. So I'd like to invite you to close this reflection by singing together. A song that celebrates that interdependence. Hymn 175 from Singing the Living Tradition. We celebrate the web of life.
Those different websites and articles and so on that Riley mentioned in her homily will be displayed on the screen after the end of the service for a few minutes, so that if you want to jot them down, you can. That's probably one of the more helpful homilies I've heard about climate change in a while, in terms of things that I can do and how I might do it. So I've got a little research to do. So, to protect the lives of all that share the glory of the earth, we're called to transform into prophets, to speak about the future that we know is coming, not to spark fear, but to bring clarity, to galvanize us all to take action for the sake of the people and the planet that we love. Well, these are the words of Martha Kirby Capo as we close our service today. Our time together is finished, but our work is not yet done. May our spirits be renewed and our purpose resolved as we meet the challenges of the days to come. The jealous flame is extinguished until once again ignited by the strength of our gathering. May it be so, and blessed be. Go now in peace.
and red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day and the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful